What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the College Football Show here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. I'm Noah Hiles. He's Andrew Destin. And Andrew, hey, we got losses on the same weekend. It's like we're finally in sync going in here. Rough weekend for the both of us. No need to really review it. We've written about it a ton. We've talked about it on separate YouTube shows already. You with Adam and myself with Chris Carter. So I want to talk about moving forward as we get started here. The best Pitt can do is 8-4. The best Penn State can do is 10-2, assuming they both win out, which I don't know if that'll happen or not. And then we'll just assume now also that they win their bowl game. So we'll say Penn State finishes 11-2, Pitt 9-4. Based on the program standards for both of these teams, who has the better year then? If Penn State goes 11-2 and wins what would probably be a New Year's bowl game, and if Pitt goes 9-4 and wins what will probably be, I don't know, like a Capital One Bowl week game, what's better for that specific program standards? I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes back to Penn State, and that probably comes from a little bias of this is the team that I'm covering. But I think there's something to be said about that in the James Franklin era, and especially so after he inked that new contract back in November of last year, roughly a year ago this time. The expectation was to get back to that level of being a double-digit win team, consistently. And even if you're not beating in Ohio State or Michigan, you're right there, knocking on the door. That wasn't the case in 2021. That definitely wasn't the case in 2020, which certainly, you chalk it up to the COVID season because look what Michigan did. They weren't a competitive team, and then they bounced back the next year and make a college football playoff.
Right.
But I think for Penn State, I think getting to 10 wins, getting to 11 wins, if they win out and win a bowl game, I think that matters a lot to the fan base. Now, personally, I don't see the value in that when it pertains to the quarterback conversation of Drew Aller versus Sean Clifford, because you've already played your big dogs and it's time to probably turn it over, turn the page to the new guy, get him some key experience for 2023. However, you're still trying to win the games, right? Like that still matters. So to me, what I come back to is I feel like in this one, it's got to be Penn State because, yes, Pitt has had success, as recent as last year where they go to a New Year's Six Bowl and win an ACC title. But for Penn State, I think it matters just a little bit more because of the recent failures versus for Pitt, you can say, well, here's success you can point to. It happened as recently as last year. The last two seasons for Penn State aren't that. So I would say it matters maybe a little bit more for Penn State to win out and get to that point because if they stumble down the stretch and produce, an 8-4, 8-5 type of season, then the trend becomes the program's kind of on a downslide and it's been 3 years of not so great kind of mediocre college football play.
Here's the only reason I'll disagree, and it comes down to recruiting. And Penn State's an easier sell than Pitt in general, just on the atmosphere and game day and the program success that it's had with Coach Franklin and even before Coach Franklin. It's just an easier sell. The one thing Pitt had going for it was, look, we can contend for an ACC title. And they won it last year, right? And they've been to the Coastal Champ, or they've been a Coastal champion recently as well. I think going back to 6-6 or 7-5 a year after Kenny Pickett leaves, if I'm a recruit, I'm saying you weren't an ACC champion, or like you're not a perennial ACC power. You just had one really good quarterback and one really good receiver, and they happen to be on campus at the same time. Where if you can go 8-4, and if you can win 9 games again, and that's back-to-back 9-win seasons for Narduzzi, that can be a selling point. If you're Pat Narduzzi, you're a member of a staff saying, look, like we lost 2 games we had no business losing, and we're still an 8-9 win team. So worst case scenario, that's the disappointing year here for Pitt. Not a 7 or a 6 or even missing a bowl, but look, like we had a rough October where we went 1-3, but we're a good enough program where we could win out. And that could include a win at home against Syracuse, our rival. And that could include a win on the road against Miami. And it could also include, wins over inferior programs like Virginia and Duke. Now, again, I also think it's just a bigger deal for Pitt because I think Pitt is less likely to do this than Penn State. I don't see many teams on the road tripping Penn State up from here on out until maybe the bowl game where Pitt, I could see every scenario playing out. I could see them going 4-8. I could see them going 8-4. and everything in between. You really don't know what you have with this team. So that's why I think it would be a bigger deal for the best possible scenario for Pitt to happen, because it seems a little bit more unlikely.
Yeah,
Well,
no, definitely. I think so there.
okay. So look at that. I'm swaying you over. You want to just join me on the Pitt beat? Come on over here. All right.
Hey, you already got Chris. Come on. You got
I
three,
know.
three's too many.
Right. Yeah. All right. So segment 2 for this, I want to just get into our games. You guys got Indiana on the road. You ever been to Indiana?
No, first time. Well, I've been to the state of Indiana. I haven't been to
Yes.
the campus. So first
I,
time for me
I
going to the
I would
campus.
imagine the campus as a whole probably more entertaining than the what the state as itself has to offer. But nonetheless, should be a fun road trip for you. I'm back home. Feels like forever since I've had a weekend here on the North Shore. But
Seriously.
Pitt taking on Syracuse, rivalry weekend, if you want to call it that. I love Narduzzi's quote to me. He said, it's a rivalry, but we're not going to be like fighting in the tunnel or anything, which is kind of how Pitt and Syracuse go. So we'll give our 3 keys to the game. I'll start off first for Pitt. First things first, when you have a struggling offense, the best way to get the rest of the team going and even maybe add a spark to your offense is by getting a big play, maybe a scoring play from one of the 2 other phases of the game. So a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown. That not only takes pressure off the rest of the team, it might inspire the offense to go out and do more. So I'm not going to make a key to the game be a defensive or a special teams touchdown because those are rare. But I will say I need a game-changing play on that on one of those things. So a big return that sets up something, maybe a muff punt that the Panthers fall on or a block punt or something, and they've shown the ability to do that. They've blocked a couple of punts this year. They've returned a punt for a touchdown. Their defense has scored 2 touchdowns this year. They did it in 2 in the first 3 games. They can do this, and pretty much every time they do something like that in a game, they win. So that's a big key for me. Key number 2 is getting quarterback pressure. Syracuse's starting quarterback is banged up. Their backup, it's a backup. So if you get in his face, you'll probably rattle him. Pressure was great against Drake May in the first half, and then once Kalijah Kancey went away, it kind of went down. That's not an excuse, in my opinion. I get that he's an All-American, but you've got other great playmakers up front. You need to act like it. Get pressure. It'll make a difference. And the third thing is, most importantly, I've been writing about it all week, talking about it all week, got to have a better fourth quarter. Last 2 fourth quarters for Pitt, they've been outscored 38-0. Andrew, that's not good.
No.
They did not one. No, there were 3 times the actual physical football crossed the 50-yard line against North Carolina in the fourth quarter. Twice were when the ball was teed up for a kickoff after a North Carolina touchdown. The third one was when Pitt punted the ball over the 50 and the North Carolina return man returned it into Pitt territory. That was it. Every offensive snap in the fourth quarter for the Tar Heels or the Panthers took place in Pitt territory. And for that reason alone, it puts both the defense at a disadvantage, and it just shows how ineffective the offense was. Those are my 3 keys. What are your 3 keys to Penn State against Indiana?
Well, the first one to me is the secondary's got to generate turnovers and specifically receptions, which should come as no surprise, right? But Indiana's rushing offense has been suboptimal, to put it mildly, this year. They're 128th in the country out of 131 teams. They do not run the ball well. And their quarterback, Connor Bazelak, has not taken care of the ball pretty well and hasn't thrown the ball that efficiently. He's 55% on his passes. He's thrown 9 interceptions. And last week against Ohio State, Penn State's defense didn't generate any turnovers. So to me, that's one that stands out, is make that Indiana offense one-dimensional, which seems more than likely that Penn State's defense will accomplish. If they can do that, force the Hoosiers into obvious passing down situations, the secondary that's been looking to generate more turnovers than it has this season under a first-year defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz, who was brought in, and everybody talked about how great he was at generating turnovers. They haven't quite lived up to that, to the expectation that people might have expected. So this is a game where it feels like that might the script on that might flip. And on the opposite side, I'll turn to the offense. Sean Clifford going back to being a game manager. Penn State has played Indiana 3 times with him as the starting quarterback. They've won 2 of those games. 2 times they've won, Sean Clifford didn't throw more than 200 yards through the air. He doesn't need to be Superman in this game. He hasn't had to be Superman in the 6 games that Penn State has won, aside from the fourth quarter of the Purdue game where he led pretty impressive, last couple of minutes drive. But the games that they've lost, they've asked him to do more, and he hasn't quite lived up to the task. A perfect example of that would be the Ohio State game. Had a lot of good moments, but in the end, 3 interceptions and a fumble that he lost. Those are critical errors that you can't have. And it seems to me like those type of plays probably aren't going to happen in this game against Indiana defense that still have a lot of rushing yards. So to me, that's another key there. Is the third one is Penn State running game going wild. It had a lot of success at times against Ohio State. They ran for over 100 yards. They outgained Ohio State on the ground. And this is not a rush defense for Indiana that is among the country's best by any stretch. So look to the freshman running backs, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. If those guys can pop off like they've shown at times this year, this should be a comfortable win for Penn State. And there's a reason that this is a 14-point spread in favor of the Nittany Lions on the road. If they can manage the game that like they're capable of, they'll probably be right around that number. And it shouldn't come as much as a surprise given these three key to the games that I think they're more than capable of accomplishing.
All right. So, Andrew, as we wrap up the show, we'll always go to our national segment here to finish it off. The college football playoff poll came out earlier this week on November 1st. The Nittany Lions come in at number 15 in the country. Pitt, believe it or not, at 4-4, did not make the cut. But a couple of other opponents Pitt has had are on it. I want to ask you, Andrew, what are some things that stand out to you from this first poll?
Well, first thing that stands out to me is I'm happy in one respect with the committee. It's kind of a double-edged sword because I think Michigan was really impressive against Penn State, but I will give the committee credit because it has said time and time again that non-conference schedule matters, and they are penalizing Michigan for that incredibly weak non-conference schedule. And that's why you see the Wolverines at number 5 versus being at number 4 ahead of Clemson. And some people might say, well, who's Clemson beating, all those sorts of things. You can't really – nobody has as bad of a non-conference schedule as Michigan had, where you're playing Colorado State, Hawaii, UConn. I mean, you're not challenging yourself, right? Yeah. So it's nice to see that that's factoring into the equation. Happy about that. However, where I have a grievance with the committee is with number 6 versus number 7. That's Alabama versus TCU. Joel Klatt made this point on one of his podcasts earlier this week is, why are you playing the games then? Alabama has a loss, albeit it's to a team that everybody thinks pretty highly of in Tennessee, but TCU has done is exactly what's been asked of it. It's 8-0. It's won every game, right? It's beaten some pretty substantial opponents like an Oklahoma State in a tough fashion. Obviously last week Oklahoma State didn't really show up against Kansas State. But the point remains that, why are you playing the games then? To me, it really matters that your top teams in the country should be your undefeated teams. And they almost got it right. They almost did, but they couldn't help themselves and had to keep the Crimson Tide a notch above, a rung above TCU, which, to me, that one stands out for sure as a grievance on my end. How about what are a couple that stand out to you?
First things first, they got it right with the top team in the country. Tennessee deserves to be the top team. I mean, you just look at what they've done. And I know that Pitt is not a good team anymore, but they came in, they beat a top 20 team in the country on the road in overtime. In the non-conference, you look at, the wins they had at Florida. Again, not the most impressive win considering where Florida's at now, but that's a rivalry game that they traditionally struggle in. They beat LSU. They go and they beat Alabama. They beat Kentucky handedly. And now they're matched up against a Georgia team who I think for all intents and purposes should be number 2. Considering non-conference play, you want to talk about that. I understand Ohio State did the right thing scheduling Notre Dame as their non-conference opener, as their season opener. But who had a better week 1 than Georgia, who blew the doors off of Oregon, who, let's check the poll, they're ranked number 8. They might still actually have the best, aside from from Tennessee. Actually, just in general, Georgia might just have the best actual victory out of any college football program this year. They've beat a top 10 team 59-0 or something like that. So I don't understand how the Dogs aren't number 2. It also would make sense marketing-wise. Something else I don't understand is why LSU is in the top 10. You want to put them in the top 15? Fine. But top 10? For beating who? Ole Miss? I get that their one loss is to Tennessee, and that's fair, but their other losses in week 1 against Florida State, like that's nothing impressive to me. And just some other things that are in here in the bottom. I mean, we talked about it before the show. I appreciate Tulane getting love. They're 7-1. But if you want to look me in the eye and tell me that Tulane is a better football team than Wake Forest, NC State, and Texas, I'm going to laugh at you 100 times out of 100. I would legitimately love for the College Football Playoff Committee to tell me that they're closer to putting Tulane in their playoff ahead of the 3 programs that I just mentioned. There's no chance. Come on. I mean, if you're going to put a program like Tulane, who's, I believe, they're in the AAC, that's fine.
Yeah.
they got to be 8-0. That goes against the why we play the games theory, but like there's a reason they're 7-1 compared to like a 5-3 Texas is better than a 7-1 Tulane. They just are. And if you don't believe me, let's see what bowl they both end up in at the end of the year. That's, I guess, my final point. So, Andrew, any final thoughts as we wrap up today's show?
There's a reason there's a Power 5 and there's a Group of 5, to your point about Tulane. Just throwing that out there, that there's teams that compete for these things, and last year Cincinnati got its crack to represent the Group of 5 teams. We also saw how that turned out. So got to factor that into the equation too, for sure.
I mean, it turned out just like Oklahoma or Notre Dame in the playoff, but I get what you're saying. Well,
yeah.
For Andrew, I'm Noah. Keep subscribing. We're very close to that 1,000 mark, which we've always really wanted here since we got this channel up and running when we both started. And, follow us on social media and be sure to follow our coverage this weekend. Both got games. Hopefully the teams can at least make it exciting and entertaining for the rest of the year. So we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.